extreme of the use and the force of green power, he will not be basically equal. So what must be done in the black power movement is to get into the mainstream of green power, to be able to exercise and to appreciate the loans and the banks and the investments, to know about the stock markets, to know how to put the squeeze on various political figures when they are out of line. And you can do this, of course, with green power. They must basically have support from people in the community and people in business and industry. The church itself depends on green power. As you know, the church is the largest holder, the second largest holder of green power. The United States government is the first, but the church is second. So whatever point of life that we enjoy or we participate in, we must at some time become involved in the reaction, the results, the influence of green power. You right today are not enjoying green power as much as some of the gentlemen on the panel are, because these are professional men. You're in the process of learning, so you don't have too much green power at the present time. But I'm sure that in the very near future, when you get your degrees and go out into the world, that you'll be a part of making green power effective. It's pretty hard to say what green power means to everyone, and some of us, I'm sure, don't appreciate it too much because it's an everyday thing. But as a black man, I know that green power means to me that I must have it in order to play an important part in the community. If I don't have it, then I'm not too well respected in a leadership capacity. If I don't have green power, I can't go to the store and pay my bills and buy food and clothing for cash. If I go into the store, the man would look at me and say, he is the one that does not pay his bills because he doesn't have money. I'm looked at suspiciously. So until I can go in and pay my bills and buy for cash, then he will ask me to come back again. This way I can gain respect to him and to others that I do business with. So the effect of green power is very important to the black movement. And we must get into the mainstream of green power. Therefore, we must utilize our resources, not only in our financial wizards, such as Mr. Johnson, but in our resource wizards, such as Mr. Anderson. And collectively, we can get into the mainstream, teach and preach about the effectiveness of savings, of investments, of mutual funds, of many ways that we can get the use of green power. Now, I'm sure that you don't want to listen to me speak all day, and these gentlemen have given you some background on their philosophy of green power. So let's get to the point and let you ask us some questions and get a good discussion going.
Before we open it up to the floor, do any of you want to say even a word? Or do you want to just get it for questions? Evan? You're speechless.
No, I'll wait on that.
Okay, well, let's get some questions going and go from there. Come on, let's not all be shy.
Maybe I should have gave a speech.
Yeah.
Mr. Davis, I heard one of the panelists say this morning. Well, first of all, let me say that I interpret your remarks to say that the use of money and the availability of money is very important to the solution of the black problem. I heard one of the panelists say this morning that if America is going to be saved, it's going to be saved by black America. And it will be saved because black America is not hung up on the almighty dollar. In other words, they don't see everything in terms of economics and, to the extent of exploiting people, this type of thing. I seem to sense some conflict between what he said and what you're saying now. It's hardly fair for me to try to tell you what he said, but this is the way I react to it.
Well, I can appreciate what he's saying, because I believe that what he's trying to say is that we are not experienced in the tie-ups of using other people for the value of a dollar or the benefit of the dollar to us. But we must realize, too, that to become effective and to get into the power structure, that we must accumulate and control a certain part of green power. This is a necessity. We have to. And until we can control and accumulate some of this green power, then we're still going to be in the rear, because we're going to be used for our money instead of using others for their money. You see, if we're not on the boards of banks, if we're not on the advisory committee of banks, if we're not associated and stockholders in big corporations, we don't have too much to say for what they do with our money. You see, And until we get on these boards, until we become stockholders, then we can control and tell them what to do with the money that we accumulate. We can control a certain amount of that money. And by controlling a certain amount of that money, we can become powerful. Now, if we stay away from the banks, you see, we're not going to be able to force banks to give us loans, to finance homes and things of that sort. And this is where the tie-up comes. Many black people do not have the opportunity and are turned down by banks because they do not have good credit ratings, or they have established no credit whatsoever. So the banks will not give them money. Now, how are we going to force the banks to give them money if we don't get into the mainstream and try to control some of that money in the bank? So we would have a voice in saying, look, you're not lending, or you're not encouraging black people to come and use the facilities of this bank. And you must do this because we are stockholders in this corporation, or we are stockholders in this bank. And we want our money used to benefit our people. Now, this is only done at the present time by a small segment of the black community. But the more black people we can get functioning on these boards and controlling money, the better chance we will have to tell them how to use this money. You can take this from the Jewish movement. As an example, when they went down to Miami Beach not too many years ago, they were told that they weren't wanted. They couldn't rent hotel rooms, and they couldn't go into certain restaurants. So they utilized their green power, and they bought the hotels. And then when they went back and they told the man said, well, we can't use you here. We can't give you a room. They said, well, no, we can't. You don't have a job either, because I own this place. And unless we're just going to take it by force, I'm sure that we realize that this isn't really necessary or possible. That we must get into the mainstream of controlling a certain amount of green power.
Norma, may I respond to that as well? I see a dichotomy in what Dr. Johnson says, but it's not the dichotomy that he brought up, that he pointed out. The first dichotomy is the way you look at the situation. First of all, he views the problem as a Negro or a black problem, which is not the case at all. It has long since ceased to be a black problem. It's now a white problem. You know, it was a black problem as long as black people were unable to get from under the heel. Black people are now insisting on being let from under the heel. So therefore, it becomes a white problem. How do you deal with this new dilemma, this new situation that you find yourselves in? Do you permit the black man to get a share, his fair share of his birthright, or do you attempt to keep him under the heel and therefore destroy the society? Now, this is precisely what the man was talking about today in this earlier session, that the salvation of this society as it is, and I honestly cannot believe that it can survive as is, but the salvation is dependent upon the black man. Moving into the arena of the society, so far as economics are concerned, the black man who is not accustomed to handling the dollar exploitively will be put in a position, once he has it, to use his dollars rather than to exploit, to help people. Because having come out of a Genesis in which he recognizes the value of helping rather than exploiting, he will therefore use the dollar in a different means or manner than it has been used by the white society. And so therefore, we will get a total reorientation of our society so far as the value structure, etc., of our society is concerned. So this is what I meant by the society not surviving as presently structured. Because once we get an equally sharing on the part of people regardless of race, and you know that whites are about 1/5 of the population of the globe, you're by far in the minority. So once we get all of these other 4/5 of the world sharing equally in this economic state that we're talking about, we're going to get a reorientation. And hopefully through this way, society, the American society, will survive. But it is in this country because the white man in this country is pitted against colored people all over the world. So once through the process of mobility of the black man, demonstrating to the rest of the world that white America knows how to live in an integrated society and to permit its colored people to partake in the society, then, of course, vis-a-vis the rest of the world, America and the society might survive.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question of you, Clifford. Why does the federal government require most of the anti-poverty organizations to be non-profit-making organizations? And do you think if this were different, that the black people could be able to help themselves more?
I can't answer the first part of your question. Why? I don't know, other than the fact that the government is a quote-unquote non-profit. But I do agree with your contention here that we've got to get out of this non-profit bag. You know, we've got to get out of it. Everything that black people head up is non-profit. Hell, look at the society. It's profit-oriented. We're a capitalistic society. So you got to permit that black man to get into some kind of operation in which he can make dollars off of dollars. You know, now we have, of course, as I said this morning, the most wealthy, the richest, the centibillionaires in this country are people who produce nothing. Not one screw, not one nut, not one bolt. They produce nothing. Their money go out and have babies and make more money for them. So we've got to permit black people to get into this same bag, where once they can make $1 million, they can reinvest that $1 million and make $4 or $5 million, you see. And this is the bag that they've got black people wrapped up in today, where they can't make money because they don't let them have a profit status corporations. Yes, I fully agree.
Can I say also on that matter of federal government? I happen to work for the federal government. I've studied it quite a bit, but to me it's in a type of way like Mr. Pillow just spoke about our congressmen and Congress, so on and so forth. And as a gentleman here at the table and myself, we've come up with beautiful ideas and programs that could very easily be incorporated into profit-making things. But you take, for example, we're limited so far. I think the type of situation is we see something happening, so let's go down there and be cool. In other words, when the ride starts, it can run down. And you might call it your fire insurance policy, you might call it your guilty conscience, or else you just might call it, security. But I think that, like he said, it could be a lot of profit making things. As a matter of fact, we'll always run into this problem, whereas the federal government will give a grant to some type of program. And at the end of the year, if things didn't go too cool or a lack of interest or something, well, then it's dropped. And a lot of times, even if it's a good program, it just might not get funded. It all depends how they happen to feel that day when they're voting in Congress. But if this type of program could get funded right off the ground, or else if we had, instead of even a small loan, corporation, we have that. But I'm talking about a large corporation loan. After that 1 year, I can't see any way in the world where a person can come up with a good, a program or an idea that will work to make money for people in the ghetto that it couldn't take care of itself. And I agree with you 100%. But I just want to let you know that's what Mr. Pillow meant when he said, let's start calling. If you believe in that, get some people together and send some letters to your congressman and let them know. As you might even get your student body here to do it. And you might say, well, what can we do? Half of us aren't even of voting age. And I think there's 1,400 kids, students, not kids, that go here. How many is there?
17.
Okay, well, 1,700 votes. They're going to start listening to that. That means 1,700 students, approximately. It means that you also have double your parents at home. This is, a great few, and your strength. Why do you think that, like, have you ever heard, it used to be when you want to become president, you go out to the coal mines, you go out to the factories, you shake hands with laborers. Now where are they going? They're going to the campuses, because that's where the strength is, and that's where the political view is, because they're trying to get you, because they know a year or two you're going to be of that age, and they'll be coming up for re-election. And that's the issue. You are a power. If you believe in that, get some people together and help us out. We're for you. We need your help.
I just make one quick comment. I think this is, entirely right. That if you stop and think now, who benefits? Who benefits, for instance, from the employment of black people, Indian people? Who benefits from having them on welfare? Who gets that money? Well, it's the guy who owns, the big stores. It's the small entrepreneur within the inner city area. It's the landlord. Now, who are these people? These are all white people. See, they're the ones that get the money. The flow of money, in other words, is out of the black community, out of the Indian community, and into the white community. So actually, they're the ones that benefit from it. And Cliff's entirely right that what we've got to do is reverse that flow so that the white dollars begin to go to the minority community, so that they can begin to, in a sense, if you want to call it exploitation, okay, but at least, we've got it going one way. We have to, I think it seems to me, reverse it. One good example, and this is a little bit different area than we're probably talk about here, but I think it's parallel to what would be going on in the inner city, the black community, maybe more obvious. But take a look, for instance, at an Indian reservation. The Red Lake Indian Reservation would be a good example of this. Now, there is little or no industry on the Red Lake Indian Reservation. There are some stores. The stores are owned by white people. There's a community next door to it called Bemidji. Now, the outflow of dollars from the Red Lake Indian Reservation to Bemidji is fantastic. In fact, if they, one of their chief tools that they can use is a boycott of Bemidji. It throws everybody into an uproar in Bemidji because the white man isn't making his dollars anymore. And that threat was used here a year or so ago. There's a regulation: you can't have liquor stores, can't sell liquor on Indian reservations. I think generally accepted that Indian people, like the rest of us, drink once in a while. But where do they go to drink? Where do they spend their money? In Bemidji. So who gets rich off them? The white people that own the liquor stores in Bemidji, because they can't own any. Well, maybe liquor stores is only one example, but there's a whole where the dollars are being taken out of here and they're going into the pockets of the entrepreneurs who are all white. Now that has to be reversed.
Norma, if Harry doesn't want to make a comment to that, I'd like to make draw one analogy here. And that is, you've got to compare your ghettos, particularly your minority group ghettos, and I'm speaking of Negro and Indians now, to a underdeveloped country, to use an international terminology. They're totally dependent. So part of the solution for getting out of this bag is to make that ghetto self-sustaining. Put some business in that ghetto, profit-making business. Put some industry in that ghetto. What I mean is profit-making. Put some grocery stores in there. And all of these things must be owned and are managed by minority group people. And here you change, in part anyway, the ghetto psychology that has created the problem. Here also you build respectability for anyone, because everybody respects John D. Rockefeller. He's got the money. And we've got to do the same kind of thing in the ghetto. Maybe not on the John D. Rockefeller scale, but the same process, where we make those ghetto residents self-sustaining, where they have dignity in them for themselves, a great self-image, and the kids growing up in that ghetto can see symbols of success, which they can't see now. The only symbols of success in most instances is that pimp and that prostitute.
I think a parallel can be drawn to of realizing that the core city is much like a ghetto.
Right.
The majority of people that take money from the core city move to Edina and St. Louis Park and spend their money there, improve their schools, while our schools here go to pot. But they still depend on coming here and taking our resources back away. That's just the same way as the ghetto. Now, one thing that is one movement that's being made in the very near future, of course, is the bank going in North Minneapolis. On that bank, we will have black people running the bank and owning a great deal of the majority of the shares in that bank. What will happen there, we'll put up a shopping center with 20 or 30 different businesses, and then we'll train black people in those businesses. And after they learn the business, we'll sell the business to them at a small interest rate. So in effect, that sure, there'll be black people there, and it'll be black businesses. And you'll say there'll be separate businesses. They won't be integrated into the community. But at least it'll be a starting point. So some of these suburbanites that come into the city can buy something from the black people, and that they will benefit by it because they will be there and remaining there, not going out into the suburbs.
This is the point I was going to add. Once you get those businesses set up, then, everybody in this room and a whole lot of other people come in there with their dollars in their hands, to purchase what they have to offer in these stores, same way you do any place else. Then you begin to reverse the flow of dollars. and put it where it's needed instead of taking away from it.
You know,
We'll
I
have
might,
one of those good soul food restaurants where you can come in and eat.
I might also point out, you've heard examples in how it's going to do it. It is also, if you take, for example, if you take Japan, the Second World War. Well, I mean, let's face it. We went in, we wiped them out, annihilated them, and dropped that that bomb, and then we came back and we said, now we have a guilty conscience after it's over, and we came back in and rebuilt that baby up. And now, I hope everyone here knows the position that Japan is in today. They're one of the leading countries in the world, financially in their business, because we did what? We came in and give them that hand. And this was just federally. They could, if these small business places would just break down. I'm just saying small business. It could just take care of itself. You might get into this analogy. Okay, now I've heard everything you had to say, but tell me, why do people drive Cadillacs and live in raggedy houses? Well, they don't own that house. And they really don't own that Cadillac. The bank owns it, but it's theirs, and they'll go out and get it washed and get clean. And when they break out, they'll be clean too, because they own that. Now, why can't you see why should one, drive through the ghetto if he lives? Why shouldn't he throw a beer can out in the street? He don't care. It ain't gonna get cleaned up anyways until they get, ready for it. Take example of the storms last year. We had little kids on the north side, 9 to 10 years old, cleaning up their parks because they were out cleaning up everywhere else. This is just the type of thing we're talking about. Is that once you give these people pride, give them this money, get their own thing going. We ain't gonna have to go right in our own community, soul brother in our windows, so we don't get burned out. And we ain't worried about that. And this will create this problem. We ain't gonna have it. Well, then there's something that you own. It's something you have pride in, and that young brother out there is gonna see that. And I said, well, dig, man. Evan's got a motorcycle shop or something. Cat said, well, I'm going to school and get me a car dealership down here. That seems like a big joke, but that's what you do. You identify with those white people, and you say, I dig that. Now, when you give us something to identify with outside you, well, then we'll start doing it. Because it's just like when you look at it, you say, oh, man, that colored cat. Right away, you're turned off. And when we see that white cat, it's the same way, man. That ain't me. But every time, that's why we have so much, admiration for the black people that do get ahead. That we claim, some were militant people that are not Uncle Tom. We just love them to death, man. And if you gave the example where you take a hardcore person, and like Harry said, we get a cat that he says, Harry, man, I'm interested in clothing business, Say he dresses clean all the time. He gets this opportunity to get this shop. Can you imagine what this would do for a young cat to say, well, look, man, there goes a man who used to play pool with us, man, and he played football together. He got his own clothing store. This is what inspires people to go on. It's something that, they can relate and identify with. It goes through the whole things of black history in the schools, the whole works. We got to have our own identity, and we can't get it from you, and that's just it. In a real fair shake.
I think one other comment on that is just to make a parallel again about going back and building up Japan after we tore it up. We spent billions of dollars going in fixing up Japan, and they were our enemy, and they would have annihilated us if they had a chance. We spent billions of dollars repairing their country, and we let some of our country, even our own capital, where the black people were living, still look like it was bombed, without offering any assistance whatsoever. We're doing that right here in the city of Minneapolis. Because your park board here, if you look at the park system, the parks in the ghetto areas, or the parks where the Negro people, the black people live, are the lowest on the priority list to have new buildings put on it. 12 blocks away from Nicollet Field is Powderhorn, and they needed a new building like I need a hole in the head. But they got the new building, and Nicollet Field still has the old one. And they won't get a new building for 3 years, you see? And there are 3 times as many children using Nicollet Field as are using Powderhorn. And if you look at Longfellow, the priority they would have even over Summerfield in North Minneapolis. They had the same shack there at Summerfield when I used to play at Summerfield when I was a child. I can't say how many years ago that was. But it's the same building. It's the same building. And they have made no attempt even to put any paint on it. And that's right in the multiple dwelling unit section of town, where there are all kinds of kids,
rats, roaches,
everything else. But see that this creates resentment, and people have no value at all what to care about what the dollar means. Doesn't mean anything to them because they never had it. You're talking about examples. Well, right here in the city of Minneapolis, when I was a kid, he was talking about something to look forward to, something to go to college for. The only successful black man I saw was a pimp. And the ones that did have a college education were working in the post office.
That's right.
See, so you have a lot to look forward to. You and your fathers, too. Because it may be possible for them to become president. the country, of a corporation, to make millions of dollars, to go any place and every place that their money can spend them, to send them. But we may have the money, but there's still places we can't go, right here in our own country. And this is what creates resentment. And this is what has to be changed.
Yeah.
Evan said that Negro people need someone to look up to. I mean, this person made it, so there's chance for me. I was wondering if a Negro person who does make it, or the professional or something like this, does he stay right in the community, or does he move out to suburbia with the rest of the
Well, let me tell you, we used to have that type of problem, I might say. But I think a lot of the brothers that moved out there, they were in the Alphabet Dream. I think a few of them are coming back. I don't know if they'll move back. But the thing, let's take, for example, we have people that have made it in a little teeny way. You could say that I've made it financially for a while, and I'm coming back to go to school and stuff. I haven't moved out of the ghetto. Harry hasn't. I'm pretty sure that Cliff hasn't. I don't know. But we're still in there, we're there all the time. You take, for example, a friend of mine, he happens to be a professional athlete, and he's made it. He doesn't have to come back, and they're coming back to help. It's a cause now where, like Gleason said this morning, even the cats that have made it have found out, that they haven't made it. What sense is there in making it when you have to give up your own identity to make this? And when I talk about identity, see, let me give you an example. You turn on the TV and I see you're John Wayne. In other words, Walt Disney just ain't hit it off. It just don't get it. It has to be violent. If you don't see John Wayne knocking a cat over a bar stool, it's boring. Or if you don't go to a show and see James Bond shoot 40 cats off the mountain, then it's boring. But you still dig this because you can identify with him. That's a white man, see? But when I go there, I'm talking about this is just for sake of identification, see? But I tell you, one of these new movies like I just dug to death was this one with Ossie Davis and Burt Lancaster. I ain't never seen no colored man fight that long with a white man. No, look here, I know people that went down there and it thrilled me to death, man. He didn't whoop this colored cat. I mean, he tricked him a couple of times. And finally, Ossie Davis put the brick upside his head, man. This was great to me. Now, it wasn't a violent thing that I dug, but this black cat and they just traded blows and they were equal. See, and that's something that means something to me. And I know that Ossie Davis, they're coming back into the ghetto. You take on your wall, for example, these pictures of Godfrey Cambridge and them. Can you imagine the schedule that they have? It's just go, and they're still helping their people. It's not the point that you have to live on 38th and 4th, or you live on Newton and Plymouth over north. But the thing is that you keep your identity and you help your people. When Cliff said about getting some money and helping the people, okay, now take Harry, for example. One of the meanings of us getting this bank was Harry. Okay, so, he said if he's staying with his people, he could have said, well, wait, now I got my cousin here, and he'd be good in this clothing part here, and my other sister, she'd be rent. But no, they're bringing opportunity to the ghetto, and they're letting, residents get it. Now, you don't need 14 years of college to get this type of thing. Just the will. That's what we're talking about. See, I can identify with Harry. Now, can't you dig this? I come to your bank, I see you. Now, I'm going to go to the bank and see me. I don't believe in banks too much, but I'll go to that one, see, because I identify with it.
The trend used to be that people, they say that the Negro who has made it, kind of like the white exploits the Negro, then the Negro who has made it also exploits the lower class Negro because, they look down on local youth. The trend is now back to the helping.
Well, let me tell you what we're trying to do, or what we hope to do, and what we are doing right now. We're making the black middle class man and woman realize and recognize that he must accept the pledge of the 3 T's. And we go out to the suburbia wherever he lives. It doesn't make a difference where he lives, just as long as he accepts this pledge. And he will pledge to help black people with his time, his talent, and his tithes. And he has to do this. He has to do this or he isn't identified with us. So if he doesn't spend some time with us and give us his talent or shake in some cash, he's not black. And he may be black as coal. See? He's still not black. So we have no association with him. So this will bring them out of their little
Harry,
dimensions.
let me. You can't understand the movement of the black individual who, quote unquote, 1956 or there before, had made it away from the ghetto unless you understand what white society did to the blacks who lived in that ghetto. You see, search for a moment your own repertoire of association of black. Bad, evil, it's dirty, you know, on and on. Blackball, you know, the whole bit. So it's all evil. So there had been, until very recently, schizoid tendencies within the black people. And Mr. Glover drew the analogy this morning. They hated themselves. Of course, the moment they made it, they got out of that ghetto because this was associated with dirt, filth, evil, ugliness, on and on and on. So they wanted to get away from that. They wanted to get away from it. So they did leave. They don't want to have anything to do. They're never going to reach back and grab that brother and pull him up. Because by his residency in the ghetto, he was identified with something dirty and evil and ugly. But coming back to the ghetto doesn't necessarily mean that he's moving back into the ghetto either. This is a kind of psychological identification with the black people who live there. Though I might have made it in so many words, I haven't. Because I can never make it as long as my brother hasn't, as long as he's oppressed by the establishment. So what has happened here is that this racistic country, finally, the black people have gotten over this kind of schizoid tendencies and are being fused into one. We have a black community, I don't care where they live now. He's black because he knows by virtue of that pigmentation, he can only go so far. He can only go so far. But if together you become a nation, you become united, you become strong, and then you have black power. These are some of the things that Carmichael was advocating.
I think to clear up some of the suspicions in your mind and what Evan was talking about the black man fighting on par with his cat in the movie, you must be realistic too. You must be realistic, you know, because you know Burt Lancaster didn't beat this guy, because there's no white man ever beat Cassius Clay, and he's the greatest fighter that ever lived, you know. He's black, regardless of what his philosophy is. If you talk about strength and athletics, there's no way in the world physically that you can say that you're superior. So you've got to get this picture, this out of your mind too. When you advertise your super cereals and stuff like that, that's going to make you powerful like Superman, and then you put a second-class athlete on there. I mean, this is dreaming, you know. You're dreaming. So you've got to be realistic. You've got to be realistic. And you've got to spend some of that green power on that man that's making it, you know, because you'll spend $500 just to go down and see Cassius Clay fight, or you see Bill Russell play basketball, or some of them guys run around the end on the football team, but you want to invite him in your house for dinner, you know. So you've got to be realistic when you're talking about power, physical power, mental power, green power, whatever you're talking about. It all is together. That you're going to have to realize that you're not superior. That you're not superior, regardless of what phase you're talking about. Even if it's your green power, see, that can't buy you strength. It can't buy you health.
I think another thing on there, in the same line, is that you give up your old myth and your old bag to finding what you term that good Negro. You know, the one that comes up is nice to you and tells you what you want to hear. Because, like I'm saying, you know, you got to hear it. You have to hear it told like it is. Because you'll never be in a world of trouble if you get out of what you so-called, what you might call a typical good Negro, and you get involved with someone that knows what's happening. You go into that ghetto, you will be in a world of trouble. Most definitely, you know, comment, I know so-and-so or something. But this is the type of thing, you know, this is what I'm talking about. Cliff said we're getting together. And that's why, you know, you talk about, some people say we're afraid of black power because, you know, you identify it with violence. But a lot of intelligent white people are afraid of black power for the main reason he said, that the black people are getting ourselves together. Look here, you had us fighting among each other so much long ago. Oh, he's Uncle Tom. He's Milton. Well, he's getting himself together. We don't know about him. But now we're saying, okay, you don't dig me. I mean, I dig you, but we're going to get this cause rolling. And see, in this city, it's really starting to move a lot of people. Because you've got people like myself on that TV talking. You got people like a friend of mine named Joker. We got young cats, and then we got the Harry Davises and the Ed Pillow, and we're all talking the same talk. And you people are starting to realize one thing. That's black power.
I think we are realistic too. I know that I'm becoming realistic of what my values are. Like Cliff said, yeah, I could very well disassociate myself with black people. But the place that I'm employed at, when they had the riots in '66, the first person they ran to is to me. What happened? Now I'm supposed to know what happened, you see, because I'm black. You know? I'm supposed to have been one of the fellows that threw the brick, that threw the Molotov cocktail, because I'm black. All right, so if they identify me with that one that threw the Molotov cocktail, then I'm with him. You see, because I never lose that identity, because I'll never be anything but black. So I must associate with him. So I realize too that I can't disassociate myself with him. And in order for us to advance, I've got to reach back and hold his hand. So that wherever I go, I'm going to pull him right with me. And I've got to hold his hand too, so he don't drop back down into the bind that he's been in for a long time. And we've got to help each other, and that's self-help. See, because we've waited for 400 years for you to help us. You haven't helped us yet.
You suggest one other specific thing that it seems to me needs to be done. We're talking about this profit-making kind of thing where black people, Indian people can begin to make profits. They've got to make profits. If they're going to make profits, they've got to make profits out where the money is. And the money is with the white community. That's where the money is. So that, you go in there and you begin to help them make a profit. Some people say, well, this is a hard thing to do. I don't even dare go over where these places. I don't dare go North Minneapolis. I don't dare go South Minneapolis. I don't dare go Franklin Avenue. But I think this kind of attitude has to go. In fact, if I may just be so presumptuous, that if you go in there, with $100 in your hand, you're probably more likely to get in than you go with nothing. I'm going to spend this money here to help this guy make a profit on his business.
We'll get in.
You get in. And so somebody's going to get taken to the cleaners. Our big deal, I get taken to the cleaners all the time by white insurance salesmen, white auto mechanics, and the whole thing, and so do you. So it's about time that, some other people start to take people to the cleaners, if that's what it takes.
I don't want to speak too far, but you mentioned something about the schizoid tendencies and it having disappeared somehow, and it's the feeling of I hate myself because I'm black. Now, it seemed like this disappeared too. But no matter how much you put in a grocery store and a bank and all this other profit-making organizations, if some violence explodes within the ghetto caused by those ghetto residents, the very people who somehow are related to this, and they destroy the thing which you feel might have a basis, how it seems like it would all fall apart right there.
Some of our own stores?
No, we don't have any.
No. Your own stores. You figure that by owning your own store.
Go ahead.
Let me give you an example. You take your little disturbance you had here. You had some places on Plymouth. They ran by. They knew who to touch up. Black people that own places, like I said, didn't have Soul Brother written on it. You take anywhere you want to go in the country. If they even had a good majority of black people working there, they didn't get burned out. There's places in Watts that stood after all that burned. There's places in Detroit that stood after all that burned. Look here, I'm talking. If you understand what I'm talking about, identifying with one another. Now, let's say that Cliff and Vern and Harry happen to be in this shopping center, and I know that they're the only three in there. And me and my boys saying, "Look here, man, I need some bread, man. I can't get a job." And the cat next door, Cliff, got TVs. Well, I can get them TVs and sell them to nice white men. I also heard a little statement a while back that we weren't stealing Cadillacs and Buicks. Mr. Dr. Ralph Abernathy said that. We're not doing that. What do they steal when they ride? Then I'll get back to this. Food, clothing, TVs where they can make some cash. Things that they need. But when I go through that shopping center, you think I'm going to get him? I might need him to get me out of jail on time or something. There's a whole bunch of reasons I'm not going to get. Because I identify with him. He knows me. I know him. I'm not going to do any harm to him. You're the one that does harm to me, In other words, that's the same reason saying if you come in your house, and you're mad at somebody, you don't go up and slap your mother. You might go out and slap somebody you don't know, but you don't take, this physical type of attention out of people that you care for and you identify with. And, that'd be the same type of thing saying, if I go out and get jumped by a lot of white boys in Edina, I'm going to come back over south and start whooping all the colored dudes. It just don't work like that.
Just a brief addition to what Evan said. What we're talking about here is how to eliminate, prevent the explosions you're talking about in the ghetto. The reason we happen now, Negroes don't own a damn thing in the ghetto. 1 or 2 stores, you know, and like Evan said, they passed them by. And what we are saying here, that if you give those residents of the ghetto an opportunity to own these things, whether they're in the ghetto or not, you provide hope for the young guys today who are burning and destroying, older too, who have no hope, you see. And once they own that house, hell, there hasn't been a house in the ghetto that's been owned by a Negro since there was a ghetto. You know, these tenement houses are owned by rich Jews and rich white cats who live on suburbia. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about putting them there so that those kids growing up will have some identity and some hope of the future, where he can go. What if he does this and this and this, he can also achieve. And these are the things that we're talking about.
I think we can have one more question. Yeah.
Isn't it also that they didn't own these places, but also they were being cheated in these places too? It wasn't that just that a white person owned the store. The white person was charging them higher prices for inferior merchandise and other things that brought out other injustices. And one example that we have at Augsburg is that we own Larson's, but the Augsburg community does not support that store, but no member of the outside community, especially the Indian community, is employed there. Only white people are working there, and it's supposed to be a community store. So we can start right here, breaking out this green power problem, because we're not hiring any Indians, and they live all around the area and go to the store. And we own that store totally now.
Amen. Dr. Johnson has a question.
Yeah, Glenn was.
Cliff, do I understand you correctly to be saying that one of the solutions to the problem then is to make members of the black community or the ghetto capitalists?
This is what the society is all about, Doc.
But I don't have much confidence in capitalist society.
Well, nor do I, but we're talking about sustaining the society as best we can as it presently exists.
Because you're suggesting that once they become members of the capitalist society, your soul brothers will act in an enlightened way because of all the suffering they've gone through.
Well, now wait a minute. Your terminology is confusing me. What's enlightened?
Well, you used the term, I believe, or something like it. That they wouldn't exploit people after they.
Humanistic is the term I use.
Humanistic way.
Yeah.
All right. How many generations will this continue?
It depends on the establishment. I say that we can make some major strides in this direction in the next 5 to 10 years. The establishment willing. The establishment recalcitrant and unwilling as it is today, we don't have any time. Time is almost run out. I say that America must take a definitive stand and provide significant demonstrations of its willingness to grapple with and solve this problem. Otherwise, we're out of time already.
You know, I might say Cliff too that, you know, Cliff says 5 to 10 years. Well, getting back to the aspect that I would like you to love me, you know, I'm human and humanistic too, but the thing I will and must have is your respect. And saying about how soon can it be done, well, we've just gone over ways of helping each other. The organization Cliff is with, GCYC, we have OEO here programs. And we do have Harry involved in just a vast majority of programs. If Congress wanted to, well, let me give you an example, and then I'll tell you what Congress could do. They go over to Vietnam, and like Mr. Pillow said, they take a person that can't even speak English language, you know, and they take him, and within a month, he's trained to do whatever they want him to do, you know. So why couldn't Congress say, okay, and we face this, and come down with a blank check and say, now do the job. That would do away with your writing and everything else. We can build up our own communities. We've got programs. I've got ideas. I'm sure that you probably have some, Dr. John. In some way would help us. You can even help yourselves here at Augsburg. You don't need that federal buck to come down and help them Indians. See, but we're talking about if we could get that or the door, the establishment. I don't want to get hung up in a type of thing where we want you, to love us so much. That has to be a known fact. Because sparrows will still stay with sparrows and crows with crows. That's human nature. But the thing is, it could be attacked tomorrow. It could be attacked right now if they'd read out that blank check. Now, we're not talking about $30 zillion or something like this, but we're talking about a rough number, $100 billion, paid over a period of 10 years. We could do it ourselves. But what they want to do, they're such a violent nation, they're going to tell us not to be violent, and meantime bomb away in Vietnam and everything else. But that's the hang-up. They realize the problem up there. They just don't want to get in position to spend that money. And if the citizens would stand up and say, now look here, baby, our security's being risked. I may not dig colored people either, but I do happen to dig being, a human being. I happen to appreciate the fact of security for my children. Give them what they need, and it would be done like tomorrow. Like tomorrow we could be on the track, because we're on the track now. We just don't have that green power.
You're talking about getting rid of your animosities, The black man did some rioting within the large cities of our country. But see, you get rid of your animosities, your successes and failures and so forth. You do that by tearing somebody else's country up. You go over and tear up Vietnam. You go over and tear up Korea. You go over and tore up Germany. So you don't, Cuba and every place else. But you tear their countries up, you don't do anything here. See, we don't have the green power to go up and tear up somebody else's country. We got to tear up our own country before you realize that we want to get rid of our animosities that you have created in us. You see? And that we are human enough to store these animosities and want to get rid of them. See? We're not some animal. We're just like you. You get rid of your animosities in somebody else's backyard. We can't go to somebody else's backyard because we don't have the green power to get there. See? So maybe we'll get rid of some of our animosity. You can let us get some of that green power. We'll get rid of it over in Germany or Cuba, someplace else too.
I'm going to let it go even.
There's an essence in Glenn's question. I think that needs a little more development here. As I understood it, and at least it's my reflection, we've been sold in part a bill of goods. I'm not saying it's good or bad, true or not. I'm just saying bill of goods that the salvation of the country is within the black community. And this is, in some respects, based on a humanistic tendency. That it is not a matter of materialistic point of view for personal gain, period. The question that Glenn asked, which I think needs to be answered, is this an essence within the community, within the people? How many generations will it last? If the black community is in the capitalistic society, will they get away from their history so that they also become exploiters, or not?
You have been, hopefully, sold a bill of goods. Hope you buy the whole package. Not that the black community has any humanistic tendencies. This was not intended. What is in fact intended is that unlike you, unlike any other nation except maybe the Jewish nation, the Negroes know what deprivation means. They know what exclusion means. They know what suffering means. Dr. Martin Luther King's theory of turn the other cheek was nothing new to Negroes. They'd been turning the cheek for 400 years, all four of them, So this was nothing new. Now, what we are saying here, and back up a step, unlike the Jews, the Jewish people of olden days of Europe in the 15th, 16th century, they had the economic resources with which to buy less suffering, with which to buy certain privilege, with which to buy certain exclusions for themselves. The black community in America has never had any of this. Now, the point being that because the black community has endured in the greatest of the depths of deprivation, that they will be more inclined to be humanistic. You see. Are you with me now? Not that there is any inclination, innate ordination of black people to be humanist. Not at all. It just has to do with that culture that you keep saying we don't got.
How many generations will it last?
Well, that was the other point that I wanted to make. It's hard to say. It depends. Now, our position, the position that I take here, is that we will get, as a result of this integration, thorough, total integration of black people into the economic society, we'll get a reorientation of that total society. You see, we can say that it took us 400 years to get this far. 400 years ago, someone had asked you that same question. You wouldn't have been able to answer it. So we don't know. If we are successful in reorienting the totality of the society, it might last as long as the society remains in that particular strata or structure.
Do you think that the white man has really any right to ask the black man, does he feel qualified to participate in the capitalistic system? When the white man started participating in the capitalistic system, he was exploiting human beings from the beginning. So I don't think he has any right to ask the black man whether he's going to exploit in 5 generations, because he started out exploiting people in the beginning. So,
yeah, I just had a quick comment. I think there's another thing going on here too, which I think probably people within the college university setting are aware of, maybe painfully aware of at times. But there's a kind of a cultural revolution going on, I think, in this country in addition to this, and which I would see even a closer joining of forces the farther it goes along here, primarily led by young people, who have had it up to here with the system as they see it. The whole system, the college system, the capitalistic system, the unions, the business, the whole thing. And they are saying, in effect, that the system, is basically sick. It doesn't recognize people's basic human qualities. It doesn't allow for these to come forth. Instead, it treats people as things rather than as people, that type of thing. And I think joining of these forces, that I don't think we can help but see some changes in the system. Whether it results in a collapse of it as we've known it, or total revamping, I'm not prepared to say. I think, though, that we have really only a couple of choices. Either it collapses entirely, or you open it up at all levels for everybody. Open up at all levels, and then hope that once this gets infiltrated by people who are not hung up in this thing about manipulation and all that type of thing, and treating people as things, hopefully that they don't lose their human qualities. Now, sometimes that happens, I recognize that, but hopefully that by infiltrating the kind of thing, by opening up that it does have some effect on the system also.
Don't you think, too, that it would take many, many generations to forget hundreds and thousands of years of suffering? You don't forget suffering overnight. The Jews, except for the Hitler interlude, have had it good for a long time. They haven't forgotten.
I'd like to ask one question. Mr. Davis, you, or Dr. Davis, correct? Dr. Davis?
No.
Mr. Davis.
Just be graduate.
You were talking about banking in the sense of, using a bank for the black community to buy and build a shopping center and then selling the shops to proprietors eventually. Now, what are the possibilities of the black community in Minneapolis or any other city withdrawing their money from the white banks and building their own bank and controlling this bank, or setting up a target bank within that area and buying that bank? Like what's a fairly medium-sized bank? All right, the Northwestern Bank System. Buy out a majority of Northwestern Bank and use that money. You'd have a majority of Negro money, you'd have a minority of white money, but you'd be able to use the full resources of that one bank to buy out the thing. What are the possibilities of the Negro community using a bank system to bring up their green power potentials?
This is exactly what we're planning to do. As you know, when you're on the bank board, you get paid for every meeting,
$100 per
right.
board meeting.
Some of them get more.
Yes.
Much more.
Yes.
So as a bank board member, you see, and if we had 15 black men on the bank board, every time they'd have a meeting, they just turn their money back into stock and just keep purchasing more and more of that stock. The first thing you know, they'd own the bank. And then, of course, they could buy out some other bank, or buy out some other business, or invest.
Or buy out the white man ghetto.
Right? Or else loan some money to some white people building homes and then foreclose the mortgages, So, it's the same thing, actually. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if we can do this, this is where we'll improve. Right. There's nothing wrong with it, you see. That's right. You see, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, because like in my hometown, I've lived near the ghetto of my hometown. I've associated with Negroes since I was a little kid, and only in the last 5 years have I, not 5 years, last 10 years have I gotten any prejudice. Because when I was a little kid, prejudice was, a thing that I didn't even know the meaning of. And then I moved to a Jewish neighborhood, and I found out that the idea of prejudice against the Jews was false. And I found out when I later on, or within the past 5 years or so, that the prejudice against the Negro neighborhood is also false, or prejudice against any people. Individuals, yes, but as a group of people, no. And that, oh God, I lost my track. But, the Jews have, my track is that through the money power of the banks that the Jews have done, and also many other Frugers, Rothschilds, I think, originally were Jewish people, and probably still are. They are a big bank. They have received social equality through their banks.
Right.
And I believe that green power for the black community, this green power of social equality through the banks is what will eventually predominate over any other power, because it has done it before in history.
Green power controls political power too.
Yeah, the green power has.
Were you saying
all
that
the way through?
Also that you find out that people are not prejudiced towards a mass of like black people? Is that what you were saying?
No, I'm finding that the prejudice against a group of people because of their background, like a Jewish community, Polish community, Norwegians, Swedes, anything, is false. I found that out from my own experience. That a prejudice against a prejudice against a community, saying that all blacks are bad or all Jews are money grubbers, is completely false. Individuals in each group are bad. Individuals are good.
I would say that suggest that instead of you moving into your Jewish community, that you move over northeast for a couple of weeks. I believe that you will be put into, as far as prejudice goes. Believe that. If you don't believe that a segment of a community is prejudiced against another community, and that's
no. I found that the prejudices are false. I do not find that they do not exist. I find that they are false.
You mean unwarranted?
Yeah, unwarranted. Right.
Yeah. Now, listen, I'm getting all kinds of signals that we should break up, but this is too good to break up. So if you want to leave to go to Dudley Riggs, leave. The rest of us will stay.
I'd just like to say one thing in terms of, I've heard, kind of an expression that by having the oppressed have power over the oppressor, that some way or other we are going to gain humanity. And I don't think that this is historically, sociologically, or psychologically true. I think only as we deal with each other as human beings, one to another, in solving these problems, will we solve them. I don't think if you whip a dog and then make the dog the boss, you're taking a very good risk.
I will only have to say you've heard incorrectly.
Right.
Okay.
This has not been what has been said. You misheard what was said.
I don't think the oppressed want to take advantage of the oppressor. They just want to have an opportunity to have the same advantages that he has. And then we're on equal terms.
Harry, I just was talking in terms of this humanity that one is supposed to gain by being whipped and by being mistreated, and it doesn't hold much water. If you're mistreated, you may learn to turn the other cheek, but when you get a chance to punch back, you probably will.
Your statement here is quite correct in individual instances. Take the military forces during World War II, for example. Hell, that was nothing more desirable than from a black boy out of Georgia to get up in Washington, D.C. and catch one of his white oppressors in that camp. Beat the hell out of him. But that doesn't change the fact that that black boy out of Georgia would still be humane toward other black people who are still down in Georgia suffering. This is the point.
People are down in Georgia suffering.
Give less than a damn. This isn't a hang-up. Whites, regardless of whether they're prejudiced or not, regardless of whether they have been part of this institution that has been oppressive, are represented by virtue of the fact that you have a white face. You represent the establishment. Therefore, you are an oppressor. And Evan was made the point earlier. You talking about blame it on your mother and your grandmother, and your great-grandmother.
This community of guilt
Yeah.
He
that
does.
is in this sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment? Let me make a comment. I think this was brought home to me by one of the black people on our staff when he and I were talking to a church group. It never came through. We know what's going on now in our society. Talk about the white society for a minute. The fact that, some guy and this actually happens, it happens all the time. Some guy, some white fellow, will be laying out on the street, just laying there, and people walk around, look at him, wonder what the hell's the matter with that guy laying on the street. The very most they do is call the police. That's the very most they do. Or the incidents that are going on in New York City that have gone, the whole bit. If somebody gets murdered, they don't want to get involved. It was pointed out by this fellow on our staff to a group of white people from this church, said that is inconceivable that a black person would be laying on the sidewalk any place and black people would walk around and pass him by and look at him like that. Now that says to me that the white community has lost something, if they ever had. I think maybe they did at one
I've
time.
seen it in the south side of Chicago. It may be inconceivable
That it's going to occur.
that it's going to occur,
Yep.
but I've seen it occur.
Okay, all right.
All right.
But would you agree that it's less likely to occur in the black community? I asked these
I
fellows.
don't know the black community. I don't know every individual black person's relation with every other that much, but I know I have a good friend who is a principal in a black high school in Chicago that it took him 3 years before he could leave school after dark.
Sure, because he was identified with the white establishment. He'd become a white nigger. Sure, that's right. No, but have you ever been with a Negro riding or walking in a completely strange black community? One thing that you will notice if you ever do it, strange Negroes walking down the street will smile or wave. Smile and wave because they have this in common. They know that they have all endured something because of the color of his skin. This is what we're talking about here. He's going to identify with and reach back now, today. 10 years ago it weren't the case, but today, reach back and help that Negro.
But he isn't being very, now, Harry, I see Cliff, I see a contradiction in what you're saying now. These people were not smiling and waving at this Negro principal, maybe because he was a white nigger, but still it took him 3 years to form the kinds of relationships where he could go through the territory safely after dark.
No, you've missed the total genesis that has taken place in black America in the last 10 years. There's been a whole psychological reorientation and re-identification that has taken place in the last 10 years. Harry Davis, 10 years ago, wasn't identified. Hell, he might have gotten stoned had he walked into some black community. This is a fact. But we are dealing with a different set of values, a different type of orientation in black America today.
You mean Harry has to make his commitment or he is not accepted?
Well, Harry had to make his commitment, yes.
Harry understands the bag ring, and he realized one thing, that he's in the bag, and it no matter where you're at, when the stuff comes down, you can't run and you can't hide because you're still black, and you might have a whole legion of white people there with you. But the first, the thing we did, see, we understood this whole bag. Someone said, this is what's happening. But see, we didn't come out and attack you right away. We attacked our own selves. We got ourselves together. And we got the cats that could hurt us. Now, let's just think what Harry could do in the position he's in now if he wasn't with us. And we wouldn't be talking about any banks. We couldn't get them. But we got organized, we ironed out these differences. We said, now look here, baby, either you get in touch and you walk with us, or you're not going to walk at all, and you will be the first one to fall. Because Malcolm X said the first man you have to get is that Uncle Tom. And that's the situation. That is the situation. We're going to make it together. Look here, we're going to make it together, but we ain't going to make it all. Now, see, we're going to bring everybody with us. Shit, Harry don't have to bring nobody with him. Man, he could sit up in that bank and just get filthy rich. And he could run off and get out in St. Louis Park and have a big old castle and everything. And sooner or later, we get to Harry, see? If stuff broke down. We get him. He knows he's not stupid. He's realistic. You have to be realistic, and he still loves his people. That's all.
One thing we have to realize that just by being brought up in the present day system, the prejudices are
filled in us so deeply that we saw it and don't even realize it. And something that brings this out to me is this child I know is one of the most thoughtful children I've ever met, where he says things, and I had an Indian friend, and I wanted him to meet him. Well, he was afraid of him, and he was afraid of me because I associated with him. And I found out the reason, and the reason was he said, I don't like it, they kill people. Well, he didn't get that from his parents, and he didn't get that from his friends at school because they didn't talk about it. It was conveyed over that television set so subtly that we didn't know it. And I can sit and intellectually say, I'm not prejudiced, but somehow I have to keep fighting it psychologically because I'll catch myself saying things that reflect nothing but prejudice. And our prejudice is worse when we just sit here and pat ourselves on the back and say, well, I smile every time I see a Negro. We sit on our suburbia where we aren't any to smile at in the first place.
Just keep catching yourself.